So today's daf is daf kufnun above in Baba Basra, which we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Asum Matzava Shivya. Says the Mishnah near the bottom of the page. We bring now a shita which is different than what we learned till now. Till now, for the last few weeks, we've learned that if a man is dying and he issues instructions as to whom he wants to give gifts to before he dies, obviously, after he dies. If he didn't say anything, it goes automatically by Yerusha according to the formulation of the Torah. He gives it away. You don't have to write it down. It's as if he wrote it down. It's as if it's written down and handed over. No kinyan is necessary if he gave it all away. As we learned, if he gave away partial, then a kinyan must be made, whether he dies or whether he survives. Meaning if he made a kinyan and was a partial, that means he was expecting to live. Then even if he lives, the kinyan is valid. He can't go back on it. If he dies, then again, if it was a kinyan, the kinyan, whatever was nicked, was nicked, whatever was not, was not. However, there was also a sheet that we had back on Shabbos that we said that mitzav machmas misa, if he mentions, I'm giving this away because I die, then whether there's a kinyan or not, it's valid. Now we have a shita of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar is different than Rabbi Eliezer. In the Mishnah, when you find Rabbi Eliezer, that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Hirkanas. When you find Rabbi Elazar, that's Rabbi Elazar ben Shamu. And the Gemara, the Amora, is Rabbi Elazar ben Padas. But there's a difference between Elazar and Eliezer. Right? Elazar and Eliezer. Here, we have a shita like this. Hamachalik nechosav al piv, Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar ben Yeshua says, Omer, you know what he says? There's no advantage of a shchimira. Even if man, he doesn't hold of the whole thing, and we're learning now according to the Rashbam, he doesn't hold of the whole thing of saying that if a man is dying, whatever he says is good. A shchimira's words work no matter what. No, you have to have a kinyan. Even if he's dying, it makes no difference. Whether he's healthy or whether he's dying, makes no difference. You have to have a kinyan. If he didn't make a kinyan, if there was no kinyan that took place before he died, it's meaningless. And then when he dies, it goes according to the formulation of the Torah. So he's of the estates, of the state rules of the Torah. Machalik nechosav pisa the Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar Omer echad bari v'echad mesukah. Whether he's healthy or whether he is in danger, his life is in danger, the standard rules apply. You have to make a kinyan. Nechosim sheish lamachrayis, like we learned in the first parak of Kedushin, the rules are that real estate, which is called nechasim sheish lamachrayis, because it's mortgaged. Niklim kesem shtar v'chazaka. The Gemara over there in the near the end of the first parak of in Kedushin learns it a lot of psukim that real estate is acquired either with cash, with the shtar of chazaka, she'en machrayis, if it's movables, enik nenel b'shicha. In other words, Rabbi Elazar disagrees with the whole idea that a shchimira divrei shchimira kichsuvim surma dami. He doesn't hold that at all. That's how the Rashbam learns here in Rabbi Elazar, and apparently Tosfos goes that way too. We're going to talk about that some more later on. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar disagrees with the concept of shchimira. This makes a difference whether you did it or didn't do it. Doesn't make any difference. And Rashbam points out that it's mashma afilu matzava machmas misa. Even we said before back on Shabbos stuff, mitzav machmas misa is stronger. Because if he mentions the words, I'm giving it away because I'm about to die. Listen, guys, I'm about to die. I want to give it away now. That's stronger. Rabbi Elazar doesn't hold to that either. He makes no difference. If you need a kinyan. Without a kinyan, it's meaningless. Okay. Rashbam points out also that according to this sheet of Rabbi Elazar, since he doesn't make him sing Shchimira and Bari, he says the same thing, that where he survived, doesn't make any difference. If there was a kinyan, it's a kinyan. It makes no difference between a person who's healthy or a person who's not healthy. That's how Rabbi Elazar learns. Now, in the Girsa, the last letter on the page in the Gemara, you look at the Bach. The Bach says that the Chacham disagree. Elu ve'elu niknin be'amira. No, as we've learned before, divrei shchimira, whether it's karka or whether it's metaltalin. Just saying it alone, like we've learned till now. Amru, lo, they told Rabbi Elazar, we're going to prove to you that divrei shemira k'sum dami from a story, v'maisa be'iman shal b'nei Rochel, the mother of the sons of Rochel. Rochel was a guy. We had this Gemara before. The Rochel was a man, and he had some sons. And these sons had a mother. It's not clear the way he says it. The Iman Shal B'nei Rochel, it's probably not Rochel's wife, or maybe he had several wives, and this was one of his wives because they were his kids, and this was their mother. So apparently, It was one of his wives. In any case, what happened over here is the mother of these sons of Rochel, she was sick. V'amru, she was dying. V'amra, and she said, to Kivyasilabiti, give this item of mine. It's either sort of a jewelry, or some say that it's like a veil, whatever it was. She gave one of her precious items to her daughter. Daughters don't inherit when they're sons, right? Even if it's from the mother. But she says, I'm giving it away before I die, so I can do what I want with my assets and my money before I die. It's worth $1,200. It's a lot of money. Since she died, and they fulfilled the words, even though she just said it. She just said it. There was no kinyan or anything like that. So the Chacham said to Rabbi Elazar, this proves that you're wrong. This proves that you're wrong. You see the difference. Amr Lahan, so Rabbi Elazar answered them, B'nei Rochel Tikmar Mimon. Those boys were bad boys, and their mother should bury them. Should bury them. In other words, we'll see what this means is that he said that wasn't really the case at all. That the mother's last words, give this to my daughter, are effective. The reason they gave it to the daughter is because the sons were bad boys, and as a knas, the rabbis took it away from the boys and gave it to them. Hefker, Bez, and Hefker, they could do that. We'll see why they were bad boys. They weren't good children. They were Rishon, as we'll see. They were bad, and therefore the Chachamim, it is a special case there. Rashbam, the last Rashbam before the Gemara here. Look at the last Rashbam before the Gemara.
But it's a Yerusha.
Yeah, it's a Yerusha, but the Chacham have the power to take it away.
They can do that?
Yeah, they could do that. Hefker, Bez, and Hefker. Chacham could always take away money. We always says that.
Before she died.
But they could do it before or after she dies. Makes no difference. Makes a difference. They could do whatever they want. When it comes to money, they can do that. So he's arguing that they had no power to do that. They didn't have power to do it. Maybe they did it before she died, Michael. Maybe they did it after. Makes no difference. They took it away from them and gave it to the daughter. The Chacham said that. Rash says Rashbam, we didn't have that. Rashbam has these extra words. You can't bring proof from there. The Risham Hayu. Their mother should have buried them, not them bury her. The Knasu, the Konsum Rabbanim. The rabbis find these sons, Lekayim Matnas Imam Labita below Kinyan, even without a Kinyan, made a special case over there. Apparently it sounded like before they died, but it doesn't make any difference. Pardon? It sounded like before he died, but they could have done it after he died too. Just taken it away from that. That would have been more complicated, maybe. But then Chacham said, yeah, we're going to make it. So according to Rabbi Elazar, Divrei Shema is not Gifsum Madami. The fact that a person dying said something, if there's no Kinyan, doesn't work. In this case, it was a special case, even without a Kinyan, because the rabbis gave a knas to the sons. Okay, now the Gemara brings down another case. Now, so we have a machlokas here between the Chacham and Rabbi Elazar. That's how it sounds like. Tanya, Amar Lahen, Rabbi Elazar, again, this is Gaza. Again, we're making a difference between Rabbi Elazar. We're going to come to Rabbi Eliezer later on. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hirkanas. Rabbi Elazar is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Tanya, Amar Lahen, Rabbi Elazar, L'chachamim. By the way, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua was also a Kohen, but that's not important here. Tanya, Amar Lahen, Rabbi Elazar, I'll tell you a story. Proving my argument. What's my argument? That you can't give it away without a kinyan, right? Maisa, there was a story by Maroni Echad, a person from Maron. It sounds like, it's not Miron with a yud in there, like Miron that we have Maron Reb Shimon bar Yochai, but this is like Kibnei Maron. Remember, like they passed Kibnei Maron. Maron was a place that was very steep and there was only room for one person or one animal to pass, and one at a time, single file. That's the Maron that we're speaking of. Anyway, Maisa Maroni Echad, Shahaya B'Yerushalayim, who was in Yerushalayim, and I don't have it here. He was in Yerushalayim. And what happened? What's the girsa? He says, whatever, it was a place. He had a lot of movable assets. And before he died, he wanted to give them away as gifts, right? He wanted to give them away as gifts, fine. Amulo, they told him, Ein lahem takona ad sheyikne al gav karka. There's no way to give it away. There's no way to give it away. Meaning they told him, you want to give it away? No, you can't do it until you do it with the proper kinyan. Now, they weren't around. They wanted to he wanted to give it to these people, and they weren't there. Rashbam says the people, the donees that he wanted to give all his assets to, all these movable assets. He had a lot of, we'll see, a lot of assets. He had a farm or whatever. He had a lot of animals and barrels of wine or oil or whatever. He wanted to give it away, but they told him, well, how are you going to make a kinyan? The people you want to give it to are not here. They're not local. So what do you do? The only way is to be makna to him agav karka. Remember, with karka, we said before, nechasim she'ein lamachrais, movables can be acquired. If I buy your house and you have other assets, I want to buy your sports equipment and other stuff, your clothing and your refrigerators. If I get the house, if I make a kinyan house, I can acquire the movables wherever they are. Agav the car, they don't have to be on the ground. They already discussed that. They have to be there. They don't have to be there. Okay, so the only way to do it is to make a kinyan on the car. Now they're not there to acquire the karka either, but you can buy karka for them, right? I can buy something on their behalf. I'm giving them the karka, and with the karka, they will get these other assets, and that's what he did.
Why can't someone else acquire it for them?
They could, but there was nobody. No, you can't account metalton.
Metalton, you can acquire.
Yeah, but there were right. But there was a lot of metalton, and they have to pull each one. We'll see a lot of animals that make mashicha. If you make a kinyan on metalton, it has to be mashicha, right? We just said that in the Mishnah. So rather than make mashicha on each and every one, that would have been a complicated issue, and there wasn't somebody maybe to do that on their behalf. So he said the best way is to buy a piece of land. That's what he did. Halach, he went. This person wanted to give it away. V'lakach beisel. He bought a small piece of land, a rocky little piece of land that you couldn't plant anything there. That was probably cheap nearby, right? Samach Yerushalayim. That he was able to do. V'amar, he said, okay, listen, I'm acquiring this little stone here. Let's think of it as a stone. I'm buying this stone. And the northern part of Aritzona, the northern part of the stone is for Yankel, or let's say for Ruvain. With that, I'm giving him 100 sheep, and 100 barrels. With that, now how does he get that? With the northern part of the stone, which is karka, he can acquire metalton. They don't have to be there. Udroma, the southern part of the stone, leploni for shuman. Okay, that's what he did, and that's how he made the kinyan. But you see, they told him that's the only way to do this with the kinyan. You can't just say I'm giving it to them, even though it was a shemara. So therefore, Rabbi Lazar proved that you have to have a kinyan. Divrei shemara is not kiksum sumdami. That's Rabbi Lazar's opinion. Umeis v'kaim chacham esvarav. They fulfilled his words because there was a kinyan. Amrulo. So the chacham. So how did the chacham answer this? The char you see over here, the divrei shemara is not kiksum sumdami. Amrulo, the chacham answered no. Misham raya. You think of raya from there? Moroni, that fell over there, barioya. He wasn't a shchimera. The whole point is we're arguing as a shchimera. You're bringing me a case like that. He was healthy at the time. At the time that he gave it away, he was healthy. He wanted to give it to these people. They were in Haifa. He was in Yerushalayim. How were they going to make a kinyan? So he did it. Agav the karka that you could do. We've said that that's a way that that people can give karka, can be makna to the rabbi also assets by giving him a piece of the karka. If the kinyan chalipin has to work immediately, you can't do it, but you can give the kinyan, you can give a piece of, we had this, I remember, I think, my solo guy goes to America before Pesach, a week before. So he can't make a kinyan with the rabbi chalipin right then, because then he's not giving him the chametz right then. He's still whatever it's going to be used, and the rabbi's not selling it yet, whatever it was. So, but from far away, you could say, I'll give you a piece of my doorstep, and with the doorstep, you get the chametz, whatever. Make kinyan like that too. Anyway, this argument stands. The way we're looking, this argument stands. Rabbi Lazar says divrei was not kisum dami, and the rabbi says it is. Okay, with the rules, obviously. If you're giving it all away, then it's chal. Only if he dies. If he doesn't die, then he gets it all back, etc. Okay. Omer lahen b'nei Rochel. So what was the story that the rabbi said to him? Look at the case of b'nei Rochel. That worked. The mother gave her jewelry or whatever it was, her expensive piece of personal item, and gave it to the daughter. And it worked. Obviously, divrei shema isn't something. So he says, no, tikbrei mima, that's not a raya. My time of kalaylu. Why did he curse them? What was this business that Rabbi Lazar said? Oh, they let their mother bury them. What did they do? They kept klein bekarim. They kept thorns together with the kerem. In a vineyard, they kept thorns growing there, and that's klayim, and they did it on purpose. Rabbi Elazar, again, you see the hey there, it's Rabbi Elazar l'tamei, it's not makayim kotzim b'keren. If you maintain even thorns, and as you can't plant any other seeds with vines, with wine, with grapes, right? You can't do that. What about thorns? Rabbi Elazar holds even if you maintain thorns. Thorns are not something that people would normally like to keep with vines, right? You wouldn't normally, if you were planting a vineyard, you wouldn't want to have thorns there. Thorns are going to ruin it. It's not going to be so good. So, but Rabbi Elazar says, no, that's also climb, as we'll see. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Kaddish, if you maintain thorns with your vineyard, you've made it into climb. Kiddush means you've made it holy in the sense that it's forbidden, and you can't have enough from it. Like kachim, you can't have enough from it. Climb, you're not allowed to have enough. Chamomim, low kiddush. That's not considered. That's not considered climb. Eladavar shekamo makayim, only something which normally a person would want to maintain in his vineyard. Maybe he's growing other things. It takes out the girsa, but you can say bishlam makarkim. Let's say saffron. They planted that chazi. People eat that, so people that's elakotzim my chazi. What would people keep thorns for? And therefore, if it's something, pardon.
Kotzim to keep animals away from you.
Okay, could be, but it also would ruin the vines, possibly. But people don't normally do that. That's not a normal way to do it. And maybe you put vines, maybe you put the thorns around it. They're not inside, not within the kerem itself. And here he was actually growing thorns. He wanted thorns. So Bishlam Makarkim Chazi, because my Chazi.
They were Rishayim?
Pardon? Because they maintained climb. They maintained climb because of that.
Only according to Das Yafi.
Only according to?
Das Yafi.
Yeah. We'll see. So Bishlam Makarkim Chazi. People would keep saffron or some other plant. That was elakotzim my chazi. Therefore, the rabbis held that that's not climb, and the rabbis held that the rabbis held that it weren't rishoim, but rather the reason that the brooch or whatever it was, the veil that the mother gave the daughter, the reason it was valid is because and presumably that was all she had. So even if even that was all she had, or that even if it was a partial, but she died. If she died. Maybe you don't even need the kinyan. However, we hold that on a partial also you need the kinyan. So maybe it was a case of matzav machmas misa. That's what the Gemara said back on Kufnun, on Kufnun Aleph, that if it's matzav machmas misa, then even if there was no kinyan, if she says I'm about to die, fine. But he held that the reason it didn't work because there was no kinyan there, and even matzav machmas misa, the way Rashbam says, according to Rabbi Elazar, wouldn't work. And the reason it worked is because the rabbis took it away from the rabbi said, because they're bad boys, they maintain klayim, we take it away, we fulfill the words of the mother, and even though there was no kinyan, it's still the item goes to the daughter. That's Rabbi Elazar's opinion. So going on, my time at Rabbi Elazar, what's Rabbi Elazar's reasoning? Thorns are not only maintained in a vineyard. You maintain, like you say, maybe you'll plant it outside the vineyard to keep animals away, but not inside the vineyard. Why does Rabbi Elazar say that that's considered climb? Shekain Baravia in Arabia, right? Arabia, Makaimin Kotzim Besados Ligmayim. They do maintain it. They grow thorns in their fields to feed the camels. Camels eat thorns, or at least their camels ate thorns. I don't know. Maybe two-humped camels eat thorns. I don't know. But they said that they maintain this. That's what he says. Whereas the Chacham say, well, is Arabia normal? The Arabia is one place, right? Rabbanan, you go most of the world. Most of the world does not maintain fields, for their camel fodder. They don't maintain it for that. All right, so that was the machlokas. That's why Rabbi Elazar said they maintain klayim. They maintain klayim. They're bad boys. Therefore, the Chachamim gave them a knas, and they said their mother's a gift to the daughter, which wasn't really valid halachically according to Rabbi Elazar because there was no kinyan, but as a knas, they gave it to the daughter and to give a knas to the boys, and they wouldn't inherit it. Amar of Levi, konin kinyan mishchimera afilu b'Shabbos. Now we get into the inyan. We're now going to approach this inyan of the shchimera that we say is that 7 days a week, or is it possibly only on Shabbos when you can't write it down? Right, you can't write it down on Shabbos. You can't say I'm writing a gift deed to the guy on Shabbos or to the girl, whoever it was. So Levi says Konin kinyan mishchimer afil b'Shabbos. You can make a kinyan. Normally, we don't make a kinyan on Shabbos, right? It's uvda rechol, it's make a chamemker, right? But he says you make a kinyan on Shabbos, but lo lachash l'divrei not because we're concerned. Rav Blazer says the only way that Shemar can give something away validly is to make a kinyan, not because of that. Because we're afraid the man's dying on Shabbos, right? There's a special Indian for people who everybody's going to die, but if you die on Friday afternoon or you die on Shabbos, there's special brachas about that. This is we don't want him to go into convulsion or to go crazy. He might lose his mind if he feels that nobody's listening to him. He says, listen, I'd like to give this way to this guy, and this to this guy, and this to this guy. But they say, Pop, but it's Shabbos. We can't do anything now. Oh, man, I'm going to die. You're not going to give it away. So because of that, you can make a kinyan. We're not talking about writing it down, but you can make a kinyan. He says, making kinyan, not because we hold like Rabbi Lazar that you have to make a kinyan, but rather because on Shabbos, we have shemet aitalav. You're not mechal Shabbos. You're simply making a kinyan, which you wouldn't normally do. Right? Rashbam says, right, where the lines get wide. The comment we all like the Rabbanan, the Divish Summadami. So he shouldn't get upset and maybe lose his mind. Now the Mishnah says as follows. In the Mishnayos, it doesn't say here, look at the Mishnah. Mishnah says Reb Eliezer Omer. Now, all the other Reb Eliezers we had here is really Reb Elazar. We said Reb Elazar holds, there's no such thing as Divish Summadami. He doesn't hold to that. Now we have Reb Eliezer. Is it Reb Eliezer? So, if it's Reb Eliezer, that's Reb Eliezer ben Herkus. That's a different person. And that's how Tosas learns, and apparently Rashbam also says Reb Eliezer Omer. Some of the gears in the Mishnah says v'chachamim. The Chachamim say, listen, b'Shabbos dvar of kayamin, that there's a sheet of the Chachamim that divrei shimra kesum surmadami, as we said, even on Shabbos, nei she'ein yochaluf, you can't write it down. Avalo b'chol, but not during the weekdays. During the weekdays, have it written down. What's the problem, right? That's one shita. Now, according to the way Rashbam and Tosas learn, the girsa is Reb Eliezer ben Hirka. So we have three shitas. We have the Chachamim shita, which is really, as we'll see, Rabbi Yeshua. Look at the next line in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua b'Shabbos, you said on Shabbos, kal v'chomer b'chol, when you could write it down. Why kal v'chomer b'chol? Why is it a kal v'chomer? Why don't you just write it down? Because we have a klal that kolaroy lebila ein milka. Since you could write it down, you didn't have to. Right? Kolaroy lebila. We learned from carbon mincha. Carbon mincha, if you give up to 60 measures, since you can mix that in one container in the base of Mikdash in one kli, you don't actually have to mix it. Balul Bashemna says you have to mix it. But if you could mix it, you don't have to. If you made 61 measures which cannot be properly mixed, then you can't do it because kol she'ein roy lebila bila ma'keves. If you could do it, it's not indispensable. So Bishua says on Shabbos they said, of course you can give away because you can't write it down, right? Kal v'chomer, right? Kal v'chomer, you can't write it down. B'Shabbos amru shavav kayam and avgav lekel miga diyochal liknos v'lichtov. You can't write it down. You can make a kinyan maybe like Reb Levi just said, but you can't write it down. So on Shabbos and certainly during the weekdays when you could, so it's not ma'akiv. So according to Rabbi Shua sounds like really like our Chachamim. What our Chachamim, meaning the sheet that we've been going until now. No matter if it's karka, if it's metaltlin, if it's no matter when it is, 7 days a week, you can give it away. So according to this, according to the way that Rashbam and Tosas learn, we have three shitas. Rabbi Elazar says, divrei shivra never works. Not on Shabbos, not during the weekdays. You have to have a kinyan. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hirka says it works on Shabbos because there's no choice. You can't write it down, but not during the weekdays. And the Yeshua is our sheet of the Chachamim that it works both during Shabbos and during the weekdays. Kiyotzba, a similar example where you see that something which works on a special case, and certainly in a case where it's not special. Kiyotzba, zachan lekatan. A cotton, it doesn't have a yad. A cotton was not bar mitzvah, cannot acquire things minat Torah. As we said, the mice of Putin for buying and selling, milk and bread and things like that, you allow that to Rabbanan. The Midaraisa, a cotton can't be zochet, cannot be mezaka. So kiyotzba zachan lekatan, you can make a kin for a cotton because he can't do it himself. Bein zachan legadol, a gadol could do it on his own. That's what Rabbi Elazar says. Again, Rabbi Elazar says when there's no choice, like on Shabbos, then Rabbi Elazar ben Hirkana says when there's no choice on Shabbos, then it works, but not during the weekdays when you should make a kinyan. Rabbi Yeshua says no, lekatan amr. If it works for a cotton, kal v'chomer legadol, since a gadol can acquire for himself, again, if color royal labila, since he could do it, it's not ma'akiv, and you can ma'akiv for a cotton as well as for a gadol. So according to this, we have three shitas. You have the shita of the chachamim. He brings it down to Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. The first time that we start with the says you always need a kinyan. Rabbi Yeshua and the chachamim. Oh no, you never need a kinyan. Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana says yesh chilik ben Shabbos achol. He brings down, but other bula marid b'tosas kasav shedachuk lomer kain. Regards b'shtei mishnayis Rabbi Eliezer. He learns that not Rabbi Elazar in the first mission, it's all Rabbi Elazar. In other words, he says that some Rishonim learn, like Tosas Rid, that there's only two shitas. The shita of the Chacham that Shemira Divisha always works, and then we have the shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana that says it works on Shabbos, it doesn't work during the weekdays. So there's a machlokas in the Rishonim, whether there's two shitas here or whether there's three shitas. Okay, then the Gemara says now, in the Gemara, Mastis and money, who is our Mishnah go like? Goes like a Rabbi Yehuda. We have machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir. Usually, when it's machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir, we go like a Rabbi Yehuda. He says basically our Mishnah brings down the machlokes the way we just learned it between Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana and Rabbi Yeshua. The way our Mishnah says it is the way Rabbi Yehuda learns it, not like Rav Meir. The Tanya. Rav Meir learns the machlokes slightly differently. Rav Meir says Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana says Omer b'chol devarav kayamin meishiyachal lichtov because you can write it down. Avalo b'Shabbos. It's not another thing, just the opposite from the way our Mishnah says. Our Mishnah says it works on Shabbos since there's no choice. But during the weekdays, since you could write it down, that doesn't work. He said the way Maryland is just the opposite. It works b'chol dvar kaim because you could write it down. You could write it down so you don't have to. But on Shabbos when you can't write it down, so it doesn't work. The verbal gift doesn't work. Rabbi Yeshua says it always works. B'chol amru. It works during the weekdays, kavachom of the Shabbos. Since you can't write it down on Shabbos, it certainly has to work this way. He learns it the opposite, that it's a kavachomer, not like we saw, not the way Rabbi Yehuda learned on Mishnah, that it works during the weekdays, right? Rabbi Yeshua said it works on Shabbos and kavachomer during the weekdays because of kol roy labila ein bila makepes, but rather, again, it comes out the same thing that according to Rabbi Yeshua is like the sheet of the chachamim that Shemar Divrei always works 7 days a week, but he learns it this way. It works. They said during the weekdays when you could write it down, Kavachomer on Shabbos when you can't write it down. And then we apply the same machlokes, the Zachar L'Gadol vein Zachar L'Katan. Divrei Elazar says for a Gadol, you can acquire it because he's capable of acquiring for himself. For a Katan, you can't. Rabbi Yeshua says, no, but Gadol Amru, who can acquire for himself, Kavachomer L'Katan, who can't acquire for himself. Just like we said, Kavachomer L'Shabbos, when you can't write it down, then Divrei Shumas Kisum Dami. Yeshua says, no, it works B'Gadol, Kavachomer Katan. Either way, Rabbi Yeshua says that it always works. Rabbi Yehuda's words now are the exact words of our Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda learns the machlokas between Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana and Rabbi Yeshua, who's really the sheet of the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, just like our Mishnah said, Rabbi Elazar Omer b'Shabbos or of Kayamin, it works on Shabbos, because he can't write ein yachal lichtov. So there, the Chacham said, but during the weekdays, write it down, otherwise it's not a good kinyan. That's Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana's shita. Rabbi Yeshua says, b'Shabbos, Amru, no, they said, even on Shabbos it works, kal v'chomer v'chol. Why? Since during the weekdays you could write it down, so it's kol roy lebila, since it's possible to write it down, bila's not ma'akiv. Kiyotzebo, again, this is exactly the words, these are the exact words of our Mishnah. Kiyotzebo, right? Kiyotzebo, or, Kiyotzebo, Zachan l'Katan, Vein Zachan l'Gadol, the Rabbi Elazar. Elazar says you can zaka for a cotton because there's no choice, but not for a Gadol who could do it on his own. Like Rabbi Elazar said, what? Like Rabbi Elazar said that b'Shabbos dvar kayamin because there's no choice, avalo b'chol. The same way, you zachan for a cotton because there's no choice, but not for a Gadol who could do it. Divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Hyrkana. Rabbi Yeshua Omer l'Katan Omer. They said for a cotton kal v'chomer l'Gadol. It said even for a cotton, kal v'chomer for gadol, and that's what Rabbi Yeshua said in our Mishnah too. It works for a cotton, kal v'chomer for a gadol. If it works for a cotton, certainly for a gadol who can do it on his own, so you can be mizaka for him because the kol roy lebila ain't bila ma'keves. So it comes out that again, our sheet of the chachamim works that dummy, and where you gave it all away, then if you survive, you get it back. And if you didn't survive, even without a kinyan, he gets everything. If it was a partial, then we said you need a kinyan either way. And then we had the shita that we said back on Kufnu and Aleph that that when it comes to if he mentions the death, if it's metzava machmas he says I'm giving it away because I'm going to die, then makes no difference. If he mentions that, then it's given away either way. You don't need a kinyan. And hechad the mace, beinika shiur, whether you left a little bit or not, and that's the halacha. That's what we go with that halacha. But we have either one or two other shitas. Either Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus, who says the does work on Shabbos, but not during the weekdays, not during the weeks when you could write it down, or possibly the way we learn, the way Rashbam learns, and Tosfos learns that there's three shitas. We have the Chachamim, we have Rabbi Lezer ben Hyrcanus that works only on Shabbos, and we have Rabbi Lezer who says it never works. Is never dummy. The case of the Ma'aser Rochel Shel Bnei Rochel was a special case. The Chacham was a knas, and again, Rabbi Lezer, according to this, got his support from the case of the guy who had wanted to give away his movable assets, and he had to do it with a kinyan agav the karka, where the code of the movable assets agav the karka, the chasim shein lamachrais nikim kasv sheish lamachrais bekesv shtar v'chazaka, and it wouldn't work without a kinyan. So that's Rabbi Lezer's proof that you need a kinyan, and the Chum said no over there in the case of a bari, and therefore that's why you had to have a kinyan there. All right, tomorrow mitzvah we'll pick it up from the mission. Nafal abayis, I love it. Here we get into the interesting questions of when did the death take place. When a man dies and his father was in this man and his father both died in the house. Who died first, right? Or him and his wife, or him and his mother. These are all the interesting questions that we're going to deal with in the next few days. Have a good day, everybody. Call too.